This day in sports history. It's June 2nd, and on this day in 1883, it was the first ever baseball game played under artificial light. Wait a second, I thought the first baseball game under the lights was in May 1935 at Cincinnati's Crosley Field. Well, that is correct in terms of it being the first Major League Baseball game being played under artificial light, and I talked about that back on May 24th. And of course, prior to that, a few minor league teams had installed lights to expand the hours of the day. But on this day, 52 years before the first Major League game was played under the electric lights, it was the first organized game under artificial electric lights. Thomas Edison had just patented his electric light bulb in January 1880. And here we are just 3.5 years later, sticking them on tall poles and illuminating a field. So this game was played in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and featured Fort Wayne Methodist College against a minor league team from the Northwestern League based in Quincy, Illinois, with about 2,000 people showing up to watch it. There were 17 so-called Jenny lights set up, though they had originally hoped to install 32. The visibility was low, and the play on the field suffered because of it. They played 7 innings with the pros beating up on the college boys 19-11 in 1 hour and 55 minutes. The play on the field was sloppy. There were a combined 9 passed balls and 18 errors, so you can probably imagine that the experiment was not well received. Now, if you remember back to that May 24th edition, I talked about how General Electric and Cincinnati Gas and Electric worked on lighting Crosley Field using a lot of math and science in 1935. It required a mix of watts, lumens, and positioning to get it right. The field had to be well lit, with no shadows. Well, there was none of that for this lighting setup because nobody knew anything about it. One report of the night talked about fielders endeavoring to take a fly and finding the rays to be like that of too many conflicting suns in their eyes, or an unreliable mixture of suns and moons. Another read, some difficulty was experienced in catching fly balls, but the batsman had no trouble in seeing the ball come from the pitcher. When the ball became dirty, it had to be changed for a new one, as the infield players cannot easily discern the earth-colored sphere. And that last bit about the ball is actually interesting because balls were expensive then, comparatively speaking. Great effort was made to keep a ball in play as long as possible, as opposed to the average lifespan now of a ball being about 7 pitches. When the folks who put this game together talked afterward, they agreed another game needed to be played with more lights, and so the experimenting began. On this day in 1949, the Philadelphia Phillies tied the Major League record for home runs in an inning. The Phillies were playing at home against the Cincinnati Reds. Heading into the bottom of the 8th, the Reds were up 3-2. Andy Seminick hit 2 homers in the 8th for the Phillies, a solo shot to start off the inning, and a 2-run dinger to close it out. Dale Ennis, Willie Jones, and Schoolboy Rowe all hit solo homers. The Fightin' Phillies won 12-3, and the 5 homers they hit in the 8th tied the record originally set by the 1939 New York Giants. It's been done 6 times since then, with the most recent team to hit 5 in an inning being the 2022 Houston Astros, who did it against the Boston Red Sox at Fenway. Speaking of home runs, on this day in 1935, Babe Ruth retired from baseball. Ruth was struggling a bit at the plate, and he was battling with the Braves management. At the time, Ruth was hitting .181. He still had some pop in his bat, though. We talked about this 8 days ago when he swatted 3 home runs, the last of his career, and the final one is said to have traveled 600 feet. Well, when Ruth had been brought to Boston to play in the National League, he had been promised several things that the front office folks eventually reneged on. He was promised a chance to manage the club, or at least co-manage it. He was not given that opportunity, and the final straw for him came on this day when he asked to take 2 games off. He was nursing an injured knee, and he requested the time away to go to New York for a celebration as an official representative of baseball. Well, Braves owner Emil Fuchs declined that request, and Ruth then asked for his outright release. Fuchs granted that one. The Babe played 22 seasons, hit 714 career home runs. He led the league in home runs 11 of those 22 years, including a 6-year run between 1926 and 1931. When he retired, he held nearly every hitting record. On this day in 1941, Lou Gehrig lost his battle with ALS, the disease that would soon take on his name. Now, while his official diagnosis came in 1939, the first inkling of the disease may have actually appeared in July of 1934, when Gehrig nearly missed a game that would have ended his consecutive game streak 5 years earlier. Severe back pain that Gehrig called a cold in his back has been speculated as the first symptom of his ALS. In 1938, he started to struggle midway through the season, complaining of tiredness that he just couldn't recover from. After starting the 39 season poorly, he eventually removed himself from the lineup for the first time in 14 seasons on May 2nd. He was diagnosed with ALS on June 19, 1939, which was also his 36th birthday. He would address the Yankee fans and deliver his famous Luckiest Man speech on July 4, 1939. When Gehrig died on this day in 1941, he was 37 years old. On this day in 1991, it was an auto racing first. The IndyCar Series, or as it was known back then, the CART Series, was racing at the Milwaukee Mile. The Andretti family is synonymous with racing, with varying degrees of success over the years. Well, this was a banner day for the Andrettis because they finished 1, 2, 3. Michael won it, followed by his cousin John and his dad Mario. They actually had a chance to take the top 4 spots that day, but Michael's brother Jeff finished 11th. Now, this is the only race of record where 3 members of the same family took all the podium spots. If you are a Formula One fan, then you are surely familiar with the McLaren name and race car. Well, this was a sad day for the McLaren family and the racing world. In 1970, Bruce McLaren was testing a new race car, the McLaren M8D, on the Goodwood Motor Circuit in England, when the rear of the car got loose, causing him to lose control and crash at a speed estimated to be around 180 miles per hour into a post. He was pulled from the wreckage quickly, but he died a few minutes later, never regaining consciousness. He was 32 years old. The New Zealand-born McLaren was a wealthy race car driver that had success on the Can-Am circuit, winning overall titles in 1967 and again in 1969. At the time of his death, McLaren was mulling retirement from driving to focus on his family and his business of building race cars that he started in 1963. On this day in 1993, New York's Charles Smith had a chance to give the Knicks a lead with just a few seconds remaining that may have led to a win against the Chicago Bulls. Unfortunately, this became known as the Charles Smith game for all the wrong reasons. This was Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Finals against the Chicago Bulls. The Bulls were up 95-94, but New York had the ball with 20 seconds left. Patrick Ewing drove the lane but was defended well, so he dished to 6-foot, 10-inch Charles Smith near the basket.
Ewing for Smith. Smith stripped. Smith stopped. Smith stopped again by Pippen. What a play by Scottie Pippen. Final seconds. Jordan for Armstrong. And the Bulls have defeated the Knicks. The Chicago Bulls with a couple of
So, rejected by Horace Grant, stripped by Jordan, rejected by Scottie Pippen not once but twice, Bulls ball and ball game, 97-94. Knicks fans were sure there had to have been a foul somewhere in that melee, and yet none was called. Smith did not want to talk about whether he was fouled or not after the game. Of course, even if one had been whistled, there were no guarantees he'd make any free throws. As a team that night, the Knicks missed 15 of their 35 free throws. The Bulls wrapped up the series in Game 6 and moved on to the NBA Finals. And on this day in 1983, it was one of the most impressive performances in the LPGA as Patty Sheehan came out firing at pins, birdieing 8 of the first 13 holes, and then holing out for an eagle at 18 to shoot a third round 63. That put her up by 9 shots on the field. She would shoot a final round 68 the following day to win by 10 shots and claim the LPGA championship. It was Sheehan's first win in a major and the first of 6 she would win in her career. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. If you were a kid growing up in the late 60s or 70s, then you probably watched Gilligan's Island at some point. And while I too hoped for their eventual rescue, I didn't stress about it too much. Well, apparently, there were a lot of people very concerned about those castaways. Beginning in 1964, the U.S. Coast Guard began receiving telegrams, letters, and phone calls asking why Gilligan, the skipper, and the others had not been rescued yet. Many demanded that they launch a search and rescue mission immediately. The Coast Guard delivered many of those to the show's creator, Sherwood Schwartz. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.